I'm gonna rename his thing so it shows Charles Winston. Corwin,
Thank you. Thank you. Make sure you're telling Karen.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're live on Facebook now. He's still trying to connect. Well, all right. We're about to get started with this. Let me make sure I'm the spotlight video.
Dr. Winston doesn't have sound or video.
Well, let's get him straight before we get started talking. He's gonna have to call in. So well, good evening, everybody. It's great to see you today. We're so glad to be able to have you here with us in our 45 minutes of purpose. This is our weekly Bible study. We're coming to you a little bit different this week. We normally have a Bible study where we're actually delving into the Word, but tonight we're doing it. We call it our Street Talk edition. This month at 45th Street, we're going to be talking about fatherhood the entire month in some form or fashion. We'll have sermons each Sunday that talk about fatherhood. We started this past Sunday talking about lessons from daddy or daddy lessons. And then we'll continue each Sunday with a message specifically aimed at fatherhood. But on these Wednesday nights, we're going to be talking about, in a group discussion, we're going to be talking about fatherhood. And I'm so glad tonight that you tuned in, because I don't think we give enough attention to the topic of fatherhood. In fact, I'm certain we don't. It's one of those things that I guess we assume that people know about, but we really don't. And I'm happy tonight to have three friends to call in or to come in and have a discussion with us. The first person I want to introduce you to is sitting next to me here in 45 Studio, my good friend for almost 40 years now, Gerald Hurry. Gerald is a retired special agent from the Treasury Department. He's been retired now for about 4 years. But he's here to talk about being a father, a couple of different capacities that he's been a father or a father figure. We also have on the line with us our friend from, and Gerald lives in, normally he's in Port St. Lucie, Florida. That's where he lives now. He just happens to be in Birmingham right now. We also have with us Corwin Harper. Corwin Harper is in Stockton, California right now. And Corwin is the Senior Vice President and Area Manager of the Central Valley for Kaiser Permanente Hospital. And he's going to give us his perspective on being a father and a recently new grandfather as well. So that's a whole new perspective for him. We're excited about that. And we also have Dr. Winston, who many of you in the Birmingham area know is the moderator of the Mount Pilgrim Baptist District Association. And not only is he moderator of the Mount Pilgrim Baptist District Association, he's also the senior pastor at New Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Hueytown. And he also serves as the tax assessor for the Bessemer Cutoff Division. And so we're so happy to have these three very learned men. Dr. Winston, I believe, is having a little bit technical difficulty coming in right now, but hopefully we can get him straight before too long. Corwin, Gerald, thank y'all for being with us tonight. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you for inviting.
So while we're waiting on everybody to get the technical stuff together, let's just go around and do some basic introductions. Corwin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your children? How about that? Tell us how you're a father. How about that?
Well, first of all, let me say, Pastor Sparks, it's a pleasure that you would even call upon me to do this. I'm humbled and honored. And when we think about my children, my wife is Terry, and Moore Harper, I got to say that first and foremost. And she and I have raised two wonderful daughters, Morgan, who's now 30 years old, believe it or not, and Megan, who's 26. And Morgan gave birth to our first granddaughter. And I remember when Morgan was born, that she made me a daddy. And when Megan was born, she made me a father. And I'll go into that later on. And It truly is one of the biggest honors that I could ever have in my life, for me to have the responsibility of raising another human being to be a contributor to society, but more importantly, a lover of Christ. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, that's it. All right, we're going to hear a little bit on your definition of the difference between a dad and a father. All right, Gerald, tell me a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you are in the fatherhood, not in the fatherhood game, because it's certainly not a game, but tell us how you are a father.
All right. Like Corwin, thank you, Pastor Sparks, for inviting me and having me here to be able to be participant in this forum. I'm married. My wife, Cassandra Lockhart Hurry. We have a son, Gerald Hurry. We have a daughter, Taylor Smith, and we have our daughter. We call our daughter, and she's just like a daughter. We raised her, Devion Patrice Hurry, who lives here in Birmingham, is a nurse here in Birmingham. Being a father means that, you have to do several things. You have to have the time that you spend with those children and make it quality time. You have to have a commitment to make sure that you offer the children every opportunity for them to succeed. And you have to sacrifice. A lot of times we want things and we want things that we want, and we can't always do that. Sometimes we have to actually give the kids more than what we had in order for them to make it. And we have to step back and just deny ourselves some things that we may want to do. And it all pays out in the end, because when the kids are productive and they're good citizens and they're doing what, they need to do in order to make it and to be able to be self-sustaining, that's more than anything we can wish for. Also, giving the kids a good base between, Christ and God, and also having them to understand that, to be respectful to everybody. So,
what's interesting, the reason why I wanted you to, why I believe the Lord led me to ask you all to be on the show, is because there's some commonalities between the four of us. When Dr. Winston gets on here, I know that we all have a military background, so there's something about us in common. All four of the men on here, and interestingly, that military background has given us all a commonality of foundation when it comes to raising our kids. They probably would say we're strict in some respects, because we believe in discipline, and that's because that is what was instilled in us. But what I love about this situation is Gerald has a biological son, and his current wife has a daughter, and the daughter you alluded to a minute ago, Devion, is actually your sister's child.
That's my niece.
Your niece.
Yes.
Your niece, who, because your sister passed away relatively young.
Yes.
And her father, Devion's father, also
passed away. And so Devion was left, and when my sister did pass away, I was there at the hospital with her in Huntsville, and I promised my sister, her that we would take care of Devion, and that Devion had nothing to worry about, because as our niece and as our blood and as, our relative, we were not going to let her fail. We were not going to let her falter. We were going to be there, and we were going to make sure that she had every chance to succeed, just like our biological kids that we had. And so that's a promise that I made, and we kept true to that promise, and she's made us very, very proud.
She's an RN now.
She's an RN. And
well, it's interesting because you have a daughter that's an RN. Of course, everybody in 45th Street knows my daughter's an RN. Corwin has a daughter who's an RN as well. It's
a lot of similarities
in all these situations. But Corwin, you got two baby girls there. How is it just raising daughters? Tell me about that.
Ooh, Lord have mercy. Sometimes I think it's punishment for my earlier life.
You're the only man in the house, Corwin.
But also I can say it's truly a pleasure. I call both of them daddy's girls. And they melt my heart. But I also feel I have a responsibility to love them, because as a father, I'm the first man that should tell my daughters, I love you, and to show them what love really is so they don't have to go out and seek it from inappropriate places. And I took that responsibility seriously early in life. And as you're talking about our military discipline, now I know this is street talk, but Dre, you know me by now. I got to bring in the word a little bit, talk about street talk. So Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4 says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So a military guy like me is disciplined. I'm going to be disciplined about my girls, give them structure, because I raised them to understand that I may not always be here. And I didn't want them to have to depend upon anybody, so they can have the right skills to not just survive, but to really make it in this world. And in this world, it could be harsh and brutal and difficult. I want to make sure they have the skills to do that. And raising girls can be challenging, but it's the best thing I can tell you that I've ever done in my life.
We're having a few technical difficulties. Pastor Sparks got lost from the feed. We'll add him back in a second.
Okay, got it. Did I come through okay, Sham?
Yes, we're still live though.
Okay, got it.
I apologize. What happened? I don't know if I'm still streaming right now. No, I'm still streaming live. So we got kicked out, Cole, when you were telling us about your babies. So I apologize.
It's all right.
And Megan, and how it is for you to be the only rooster in the hen house.
Well, you know, I really take it, Pastor Sparks, as being the following. I think my responsibility as a father is to be a priest in my home, the protector and the provider, and
All
not
right.
limited to that, but as a high priority. And that's something my wife and I've talked about for years. And also the first man that should be telling my daughters that I love them and showing them what love is. Because
Let
at
me
the
ask
end
you
of the
this.
day,
Now, I know your background a little bit, and I know your
mhm.
father. And who did you learn how to be a father from? You have that kind of your dad, yeah.
Well, my dad, Nathaniel Harper. My dad was the best man in my wedding.
Okay.
He always showed me how to be a responsible man. He's now 85 years old. He's living out here in California with us. And I just love that guy. I mean, we're best friends now, but he also showed me tough love, but he also showed me compassion. And both of those things together, when I'm raising daughters, it was about compassion, it was about love, but it's also about toughness. And he said, son, I want to prepare you in life because I may not always be here. So that was always in the background of preparing me. And frankly, sometimes my daughters didn't understand, but it was preparing them for a life of, if I'm not always here, you can make it. And I felt that was my responsibility as a father. And I learned that from him.
What about you, Gerald? You and your dad have that kind of relationship. Did you learn your primary fathering skills from your dad?
I learned my primary skills, you know, as far as being a father from my father. My father was very patriarchal. He drilled into us of being responsible, right? Of taking care of our responsibilities. And, you know, I saw that in how his actions were with my mother. You've been to my house before and you saw whenever we had to have, you know, family trips, my dad always took the initiative to make sure that everything was always done. My mother, and we have a lot of single mothers who have to do things, but with me having both my parents, my dad always made sure the car was packed. He made sure there was gas in it. My dad always made sure that, you know, when we traveled, we were safe. He always talked to us and made sure that everybody knew if anything happened, what we were supposed to do. He always talked to us as kids, my brothers, my sisters, about responsibility in life and growing up and being responsible to stay out of trouble, make sure that we got a good education. We always went to church, and my dad always told us, for us to have that belief in a higher power, because there's going to be times when you're going to need to rely on that and not just yourself.
Right.
He also taught us too that as family, we take care of each other. And that's where it was so natural for us when my sister passed, Devion, and my brothers and I, my brothers stepped right in, I stepped right in, because that had been something that my father taught us.
Drill that in you.
And we saw that when we would go down to from Tuskegee, Alabama to Selma, Alabama, and Uniontown, Alabama, how my dad would interact with our family members down there and how he would do things. He gave people cars. He would buy groceries. He did all those things, and that just, made a real big impact on us.
And so you find yourself doing the same kind of things now?
Yes, I do. We do that. My wife and I, and we talk about it, and we try to instruct the kids too, that you have to do things to help take care of others.
Right.
Not just your family, but also our, enlarged family of people that we know and people that are in need.
I see similarities here. I see Corwin has his parents living with him. That's a reversal. Corwin, I know, is an only son, only child. And so that responsibility falls on him. Right. And then I see you have reached outside of your core family, right, and are taking care of, as best you can, your needs with your brother's assistance. It's just something that's instilled in you as a family, that family takes care of family. You got that from, I'm sure, Corwin, you got that from your mom and your daddy, that when the time comes, that's part of your responsibility. Take care of.
Absolutely. So, we talk about generations and generations of families living together. So both my mother and my father took care of their grandparents and made sure they were taken care of until their later years. And my great grandmother lived with us in South Carolina. So I watched that behavior model in which my father and my mother took care of the elderly in the family. Because the word of God says, honor thy mother and thy father all the days of their life, and the days should be long. I watched them honor their grandparents in a loving and caring way. And then my daughters are watching how I'm honoring my parents and how I'm honoring my mother-in-law. And if we don't take time to teach that, two generations from now will not understand the importance of why family should be helping and taking care of family, because frankly, we're all standing on the shoulders of people who have gone on before us, making huge sacrifices for us to do what we're doing today. And that really, my father exemplified that.
I'm hoping my friend Charles Winston can come in, because he has a unique perspective on it. You're married now, right? Is that correct? And you've been married for how many years now? Or how many years you been married?
It'll be in August. August will be 31 years. Yeah.
31 years. And Gerald's married now, but
It's 5 years for me.
5 years. You're in K Sandra. I see a peeking right there. But the truth of the matter is, your son, you're no longer married to your son's mother.
Right.
Now tell me about that environment.
That it can be somewhat stressful when the child is torn between two parents. One of the things that I like with my current wife, with Cassandra, is she has really bridged the gap with making my son feel comfortable with still having his relationship with his mother,
right,
but also having a relationship with her, not trying to replace his mother, but being there as a mother figure for him. So if he does and he feels he needs to talk, and he feels that, he would like to discuss things, say something that he may not want to talk with his mom about, or if she's not available, that she's available and he can still feel comfortable in talking to her. Just like with Taylor, daughter, I want her, and I encouraged her, and Kay Sandra did too, of being comfortable to talk with me.
You're not her biological father.
I'm not her biological father, but as a father figure, to be able to talk to me and feel comfortable, when she had questions that she would, want to talk to her father about, and, you know, not to take the place of her father who's still living,
Right.
but to feel comfortable in being able to ask and be able to receive information and talk to me about things that maybe only a father could really answer. Not that mothers can't, because we all have roles where we played as mother and father, you know, with our kids, especially if we've gone through a divorce situation. But when you do have that kind of relationship and you foster that kind of relationship, and the parents foster that kind of relationship, that makes it so much easier when the kids can feel comfortable in talking to you, and you can take on that father role.
It takes a lot of work to make that happen.
It does take work.
Now, right now, you don't have any grandbabies yet.
No grandchildren. That's where our similarities end. You all have grandkids, and I don't have any grandkids.
But Corwin over here does, and he's got a son-in-law, and that's a whole different dynamic too there. And Corwin, when you got a
Amen.
role now and extend that, let me ask both of you this now. This is a question that somebody's already sent in to us. Talk about some things you're doing now as a father that you swore you would never do when you were growing up. To never do. What's some things that you find yourself doing that probably just go along with being a father? Tell me about it. Think about it for a second, because I'm sitting here right now and I'm thinking about some things that I found. One of the trouble things I found, one of the things I found about being a father to my kids, my two kids, and I've had to learn since they've become adults when to shut up, when to say nothing, which is probably the hardest thing in the world, because sometimes my opinion is too much in the situation. It's too much because we have strong voices in our children's lives. So it's too much. I need to be quiet and let them grow through what they're going through. That's important. And you don't want to see your children suffer, but you got to let them grow through. And the other thing is, sometimes it's just not needed, in my opinion. They just want to tell me what's going on with them, and I just need to shut up. They're not always coming to us to ask us for opinion. Sometimes they just coming to inform us about what's going on. Learning how to shut up is important. Y'all had that experience?
Yes. so Dre, so here's the just to be transparent. So when your daughter gets married, as a father, you're no longer her covering.
Yeah. Put it out there now.
You're no longer her covering.
That's right.
And you're no longer the number one guy in her life.
That's right.
And so, first of all, you need to talk to other men to say, how do you deal with it? To be honest with you,
right?
And then you got to figure out.
Give me your number.
You can't give feedback unless she asks for it. And see, here's the deal. This is where the relationship with the father and the daughter is different than the relationship with the mother and the daughter, because they always gonna talk up. They're gonna talk up. But the dad gotta lay back in the cut a little bit. Now, when I was younger, I said, well, I'm always be close to my daughter. She always be talking to me. But then now I'm like, I got to lay back in the cut. And we are continuing to develop our own new relationship. Now that she's named our first grandchild, Harper, which just melted my heart.
You got bribed into submission. That's what it was. You were bribed into submission on that one.
Melted my heart. And I'm like,
yeah.
But she knows. If she needs something from dad, I'm here. So you're right, Drake. It's more about being quiet and just being there and being present, and then just lay back a little bit. And that's what I've had to learn, is how to lay back. Because you're right, both of us on this call, all of us on this call are type AAA personalities, where we're hunters, we go out and do stuff. But now it's lay back.
So here we are. I think we got Dr. Winston on right now. You on, Doc? Can I hear you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
I can see you guys and I'm on the phone.
I wish we could see you, but I know I'm glad to have your voice on here, because it's an important voice in my life, and I know how important it is in our community. You had a unique situation. You've had one in your life, and that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your early years and early marriage?
Oh, okay. But in the early years of my marriage, one thing is I was married 5 years before my first child was born. So we were really, really ready for a child. And all of my friends already had children, so we kind of became the living babysitter. And my wife was very, very glad to do it. And so after the first child, we had much experience and knowledge. Well, not long after that, my wife got ill and stayed ill for about 6 years and ultimately died with breast cancer. So now I got two kids that are 8 and 10, a girl and a boy. And thank God for mothers who teach their sons to be more than just a good man, and fathers who inject into it. Sometimes even at the objection of my father, he thought as his only son that I shouldn't do certain household tasks and her household chores. That was his foundation, and that was the way he came. But my mom insisted, and she always said, because you may get a wife that's sick, and you're gonna have to know how to iron, you're gonna know how to cook, you're gonna know how to clean the house, and she was pathetic. She was pathetic. So doing that,
you had a big circle of people helping you too, because you had your sisters and your mama still who were able to help you. Is that correct?
Oh, without a doubt. My mother was just the person who could come in and relieve, and of course, children are glad to have grandmama. But she wouldn't take responsibility. She wouldn't take it on. You know, they went home with me every night. Right. And actually, she was still working, so she finally cut a deal. And I was in school. And it was time. So those nights I had to go to school, she came from work, picked them up from school, took them to the house, got them prepared. So that kind of foundation made a tremendous difference. Tremendous difference, and having family support, but having to be, and my wife was a stay-home mom, so my kids were used to a lot of attention. They were used to dinner being ready when they got home from school.
Oh wow!
They were used to, and about 3 weeks after death, they kind of informed me that was the norm for our household. So I learned real quick how to cook at night.
Wow. So
you the oven.
You remarried, Doc. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Say it again, Doc.
You go ahead and finish what you were saying. I'm sorry.
I'm saying I was just telling how you learn to use the oven on 250, 300 and crock pots overnight because I'm still working. I became a chef dad.
You did. Did you let me ask you this. You remarried, correct? You remarried.
Correct.
And was that difficult getting to bring your family in to a whole nother family, because your current wife also had kids, is that correct?
She had a daughter that was much older than my kids, and we had to blend that family. And it was not difficult because of my current wife and her attitude and acceptance. I think I had to make her acutely aware that if you try to compete with Janet, who is my deceased wife, then you're trying to compete with an angel, who, if she had any faults, they died with her. So now she's a perfect individual. And we got through that without any hinges. And my children were young enough and had such great parenting from their mother and both of us until they received it. And they're probably the last generation of kids that listen to their parents. Now, we had some interference. Some outside interference from other side and those kind of things. But we got past that real quickly and blended. I can tell you some stories about that. How it is that you have to allow children in a blended family to reach their own plateau.
Right.
And how it is as the head of the household, you got to set some perimeters. I can remember my son kind of agonizing over what to call my wife. And finally I had conversation with them, and we would have family meetings. Whenever it was a discussion, anybody could call a family meeting, and that means that you stop and you sit down and you listen to each other.
Right.
He was having issues with it because I think somebody else was in his ear, and finally I said, I can't tell you what to call her, but I tell you what you won't call her. You won't call her by her first name.
Right. Right. That's great. Let me ask you this, because I asked Corwin and I asked Gerald this a few minutes ago. I know you had a particularly close relationship with your father. I never met your father, but they're thinking and they're about to tell me some things that they swore they would never do when they were younger that they find themselves doing now as parents. Corwin, did you come up with
I think it's, for me, it's just the opposite. My father was my idol, and he was such an even-tempered man, and had such work ethics. I often quote him now, and I'll say that, and folks will look at me like, man, that's a good deal, because his thing was a man should work with a half a day. You pick the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours.
All right, I got you. Well,
so I still work a half a day.
You still do it now. Corwin, did you come up with something? Because I know you and your dad are close like Pastor Winston and his father.
Well, my father first started with about how you treat your wife. He said, God gave you that woman, so you should never raise your voice or hit that woman. And this is how you should treat her. I mean, I'll never forget him talking to me about that. And then as a father, he says, son, you're going to always be with me, and I'm never going to take you a place in which I would embarrass you or a place that would disrespect the relationship that we had. So I just watched his maturity and his care for me, and I try to translate that onto my own daughters. And that's what I remember special about my dad.
Well, Gerald and I are a little bit different in that respect, because we kind of had daddy issues, to be honest with you. Now, Gerald may not have had as many issues as I did, but Daddy was a provider. He was a provider. Yeah. We admit that. Oh, yeah. But not so much a nurturer.
Right.
Didn't have that. We didn't have a hugger. Right. Just kind of too strict in some respects. Yeah. And we struggle with that. Is that you?
Yeah. And my brothers and I, my father passed on May 8th of this year. And my brothers and I sat and talked about that. And when I talked to Pastor Sparks, he did my dad, we call it a eulogy, more so a gravesite service. But we talked about how back when our parents and Corwin, I know your dad's 85. My dad was 85 when he passed. Sometimes they would use different tactics with kids than what we use. They would say things to us that we considered harsh. Boy, you ain't gonna never grow up to be nothing. You got bad grades. You're gonna end up being a bum. And I wouldn't spend a dime on you in college with these bad grades you have. And, we thought that was harsh, and we thought that the parents were being mean to us, and that, my dad, he must not really like me, talking to me like that. But as we talked about it, that was more so to motivate us. It was something to motivate us. It's not something I would have used, and I did not use to motivate my kids. And when I say my kids, I'm saying Taylor, Devion, Jared. But that was their way. My dad was not a big hugger. He was really, he believed in being the authoritarian in the family. And he definitely took care of everything. He always took care of everything. But, his motivation to get us to do things was more so by leading on an authoritarian level and not necessarily with a loving type of way. But he always instilled in us to make sure that we did the right things, and that would pay off for us later on in life.
Now I'm listening. Dr. Winston said his daddy was his idol. I know that Corwin says his daddy was his best friend. Gerald says his daddy was strict and authoritarian, not necessarily, but he learned so much from him. My dad, I grew up with a stepfather, Cedric Sparks, who provided, was not a nurturer. That wasn't in him to do that. I met my biological father when I was 26 years old. And so certainly there was no nurturing there from him. All these different shades of fatherhood. And yet I'm still looking at the results of all of these men that have come out accomplished. No one way to do it. No one way to do it. Not only am I looking at this circle of men who are all accomplished in their own right, God has shown favor on each of us. I also see the fruit of these children that have come out so well, because as I calculated, all the children involved that we've been talking about have got college degrees and been to college and graduated. And my Lord, I think what we're trying to say here is there's no one way to do it. No one way to do it. There are probably some ways we can do it wrong, but we probably picked up on those things and didn't do it. So let me ask you, Corwin.
Yeah.
Anything you said you weren't going to do and you're doing now? You're trying to get away from my questions.
You already talked about the power of shut up, man.
Yeah.
And also, you think that you're not going to be involved in your kids' lives after they get married, but you will be involved because they're raising your grandchild, but it's a different way to be involved. And then we as fathers have to mature and not quit growing to understand how to make our own adjustments. Because early in life, I was saying, no, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna still do the same thing I always done. But the reality is, no, I've had to change so I can maintain the relationship with my daughter and love on my son-in-law. And the unique thing about us, Morgan also has a stepson. So he calls me grandpa. So I got to make sure I'm attuned and treating him just like Harper. His name, we call him AJ. So then you're not separating the family. And I think that as a young person, we think that once the kids get out the house, they're grown. Nah, you as a parent, you still got to grow too.
That's a fluid.
That's right.
That's a fluid situation.
That's right.
Man.
Yeah, man.
That's fluid. Grown takes on a whole new definition. Well, so
Lord. Hey,
so maybe nothing that you said you wouldn't do as an adult that you find yourself doing now. But let me just ask this: full disclosure, Dr. Winston, what regrets do you have that maybe some things you had done different when your children were younger?
I really thought that I would never be the giver and make the sacrifice, lay on the sword for anybody. That was my daddy's forte. That was his thing. He started a community Thanksgiving breakfast, served 700-800 folks on Thanksgiving Day. I did that for 25 years. The one day he gave me a half a day off was my son was born on Thanksgiving Day.
And you got a half a day.
And he called me. He called me to tell me, listen, your wife had a baby, so you need to come down here and serve these greens. and that was him. That was him.
Yeah.
And actually, my friends probably quote him as much as I do, because that's the impact that he had. Just the other day, and it's probably not, so I guess I can share it. Tommy Lewis legitimized his son, and all of my life, they knew that my dad, one threat to me was, boy, don't mess my name up.
Yeah.
And
I'll say that about the name now. Don't play with my name.
Yeah. He gave me his name. He said, just don't mess my name up. And that was the first thing that Tommy told his son.
Yeah.
After legitimating him a couple of weeks ago. Boy, I just gave you my name. Don't mess my name up.
Lord have mercy.
And I said, I know where you got that from.
Hey, Pastor, I got to give an amen and shout out to what he just said about don't mess up the name.
Yeah.
And I think that what we haven't done as fathers enough is highlight that. I know that my father used to tell me all the time, I don't want to ever have to come pick you up from no jail.
Yeah.
So I mean, every Friday night that I was going out or Saturday, because I watched the car all day long, and pick peas and beans, and before I could go anywhere, he said, I don't want to have to come get you out of jail. And that stuck with me. But he also would tell me how I needed to behave. And he said, you better not go no place that I would be disappointed I have to come get you from if something happened. And sure enough, all of us had them old cars back in the day. The car would break down, and sure enough, it would be at a place that it wouldn't be disrespectful to him to have to come pick me up and help me get a jump. Because there was no AAA back in the day in the country where I was. So I think that this name that we talk about, that was a powerful statement. We got to pass it on to the next generation, because that meant there was a level of sacrifice that the parents put in place so we could be where we are today. So don't mess that name up.
My apologies. We're having technical difficulties again. We're waiting on Pastor Sparks to call back in. In the meantime, Corwin, do you have any more advice for our listeners?
Well, you know, the advice I would say is the following, especially when it comes to, earlier I mentioned that a father needs to be a priest, a provider, and a protector in the home. And I also think that Ephesians 5 and 6 gives a good framework for how a father should lead his family.
You're
Because
right.
I really believe that children, and I know children are a gift from God, and
They
I
are.
dare not take that granted. And I think Morgan, Megan, Justin, my son-in-law, and our grandchildren, those are precious gifts. And I have a responsibility to take care of that gift, not be overbearing, but be loving first. And that's something, frankly, that many men aren't taught. And that's how to love. And I just
So
hope
let me
that
ask you this, Corwin, because
with that.
you're dead on the Bible. You're dead on the Bible on that. But now we were brought up in that kind of environment where folk believed in the Bible.
Yeah.
You were brought up by a father who was teaching you the Bible. You, Gerald, of course, Dr. Winston was. I was as well. The person that I known for nurturing and who I got that from was my grandfather. My grandfather, who was a Baptist pastor. So I got that environment too. But what about these young boys who don't grow up in that environment, who don't grow up with somebody teaching them about Scripture? We gotta have a broad enough tent so that they can at least see our example, and we got to talk about it. You agree with me? We're not doing enough talking about how you get to this life of a blessing if you're going to live the right way. You agree with that?
I agree with that. One thing that I've heard from my daughters and their friends when they were growing up, that they wanted people to be real with them. Tell me about your mistakes. Don't just tell me about all the good things. They want to know how, if you made a mistake, how did you overcome it? And at the end of the day, you got to connect with these young folks and create relationship. In fact, right in the middle of this call, one of my mentees called me, Darren Lee, who's now an attorney in Arizona, has his own family now. And he's allowed me to be into his life. And he has a father and a mother, but I made an intentional effort to reach out to him because I saw great potential in him, because I saw he could be a great leader. I saw he could be a great man. So why wouldn't I invest in that?
You just came up with something that's important. You had a solid father. You think the Lord has blessed you to be a solid father, but it's also incumbent that we reach out to folk just to mentor, just to be friends with, and spread the reach of what we got foundationally. You agree?
Right. Oh, I agree totally. I have a young man that that I initially interviewed for a job interview with another group,
right?
And they didn't hire him, but I was so impressed by him, and I told Kay about him, and I was so impressed on how mature he was. And I subsequently hired him. He was married. He had a really young daughter, just born when he moved there, and came to work for me. And, you know, I've kept in contact with him. He subsequently left. He went to another agency, went to ATF. Kay and myself and another friend of mine who retired also, we went to his graduation. And we were so impressed by him. He's come to go hunting with us in Tuskegee. And he's a family man.
Yeah.
He goes to church. He takes his daughters. He teaches them. And he and his wife, they teach their daughters to be respectful and to love everybody, and that, you know, do what's right.
Right.
And good things will happen for you. And they just have a brand new baby. And he called me and said, you know, he said, Gerald, I really appreciate everything that you and your family always did for me. You always, you know, looked out for me. You always were there to guide me and give me good guidance.
Right.
He said, my father had passed.
Right.
And he said, you were like a father figure to me at work.
So you extended the reach of
So I extended it because, you know what, he just reminded me of how much, you know, we need to reach past just our immediate family sometimes and go to people, you know, that may be in need.
And sometimes they're co-workers.
And they're co-workers.
Friends, neighbors. I know Dr. Winston. Dr. Winston, how many sons of the church do you have there from New Mount Moriah, Dr. Winston? How many additional pastors have been called from New Mount Moriah Church?
Either has joined under my ministry or been called. I got 17 sons. They are almost as many preachers as I have members.
So that's 17 other churches that have leaders that have come out of the ministry that God has blessed you with. I don't know that there's any great example of discipleship, leadership, and foundational growth in that. So I want to publicly thank you for that. Look, I know, and I hate this because we call it 45 minutes of purpose, and we try to stay on the 45 minutes. We could go on having this conversation, and I'm sure I wish we could go a little bit deeper, because all of us have some mistakes we've made. And Corwin mentioned that we need to be able to, at some point, talk about our mistakes so that young folk understand that the road is not always smooth, and yet you can still be blessed by the Lord. But unfortunately, we promise that we're not going to go on too much longer than the 45 minutes. We've had some glitches tonight, which is why I'm still talking a little bit, going a little bit further. But we got to, I want to thank Corwin for calling in. He's 2 hours behind us in Stockton, California, but he was willing, and he just got off the road. I want to thank him for calling and talking in today. Appreciate you doing that. Appreciate, you know, I owe you. I want to thank Dr. Winston for going back to his office and calling in tonight and being a part of our discussion here. 45th Street, we think it only enriches our church and our community. And I want to thank Gerald Hurry for coming from Port St. Lucie, Florida, being here with us. All of them are my friends. I thank God for them being in my life. They've all been a blessing to 45th Street tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our learning session tonight, whether it's Bible study or discussion. We hope it's been purposeful for you. This has been 45 Minutes of Purpose. Next week, we'll continue our discussion on fatherhood, but I won't be the host. Anthony Sparks will be the host. I already know he's got District Attorney Danny Carr lined up to be a part of it. And he's got, I believe, one of our deacons from the church or two of our deacons from the church. I'm excited about what's going to happen. You're going to get a younger point of view on fatherhood next week, but we'll still be doing 45 Minutes of Purpose. God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of our lesson tonight. Good night and take care.